Hello and welcome to another Business Studies IGCSE and GCSE presentation. Today's topic is Enterprise, Business Growth, and Size. So we talked about the factors of production previously in chapter number 1, where we talked about the 4 factors of production being land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So enterprise is the 4th factor of production, which is a quality of combining the factors of production and taking on the risks of combining them. So an entrepreneur is an individual that possesses the quality of enterprise. So he bears the responsibility and takes the risk of combining the other factors of production. So he decides what to do with the land, how to make use of the labor, and how much capital is needed. He takes on all these questions and he answers them. So being an entrepreneur, when you run your own business, you tend to have your own sorts of advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages are, think of yourself running your own business. So think of yourself creating your own YouTube content or creating music, or maybe someday owning a card shop where you sell games and cards, comic books. So what you could do as your own boss is you tend to decide what time you want to work for. So you could tend when your shop opens, or you could decide when you want to record your own music. The other thing is you get to decide on what ideas to implement. So you get to decide the direction in which you want to take your business towards. The disadvantage, however, is most new businesses tend to fail. This could be roughly an approximate of 80%. So there is a very high chance of businesses, tending to fail. Because it's similar to thinking about someone dropping out from school to playing soccer. So there are lots of kids that drop out from school, and there is only one footballer that makes the grand stage, and he has a background story of dropping out from school and making it through to the high end. The other thing is, because of an individual, so think about most big companies. So they have trained professionals that have proper management degrees. They tend to generate experience over time by working at different roles. So in comparison to that, a new entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have all the expertise and knowledge required to running a business. So he may have some knowledge regarding his own business, but he might not know. So say if you own a restaurant, so you might know regarding the menus, the culinary items and everything, but you might lack the decision making with regards to what suppliers to choose, or regarding decision making like financing. How do you want to finance your restaurant over time? How much working capital you need, and what kind of methods what kind of stop gaps that could be produced, and how you're going to solve them. So the last disadvantage would be investing their own capital. So an entrepreneur invests his own capital into the business. Now this creates 2 problems. First of all, if the business fails, you would lose essentially all your investment. So you might lose all your earnings that have been stored over the years. The other thing is, if you want to expand your business, there is only so much funding that you have access to, because your own capital is always limited. So the next question is, what makes a successful entrepreneur? Now, this is a secret sauce that through many centuries people have been wondering and trying to figure out. So at the end of the day, there are certain qualities that tend to exist in common with all successful entrepreneurs. So they tend to work very hard. They work long hours. So most of the time when you're working for something, for your own business, you tend to be really motivated and passionate, and you would work, say, 20 hours in a day. So the ability to work long hours and the ability to commit yourself is one of the factors. The second quality would be the ability to take risks. Now, think about a revolving door, and someone asks you to walk through that door, with there being a 50% chance that you might not make it on the other side. So there's a 50% chance that you walk through that door and you might not come out of it alive. But then again, they say that if you do come out alive, you get a $1 million prize, or say you win the lottery and you make much more, 100 million. So how many people do you think would actually take on that risk of walking through that revolving door in order to win that money, when there's a 50% chance that they might not make it? So this ability to take risks is a very important quality that most people do not have. Most people try to play it safe. An entrepreneur takes calculated risks. The other quality is being creative. So think about a customer, and he's trying to buy two similar items. See, he would ask himself, like, why should I go for your product over someone else? That's why most businesses try to create a differentiating point, a unique selling point. So entrepreneurs tend to get creative regarding this problem, and thus try to create a differentiation which attracts customers and fosters customer loyalty. The other quality is being motivated. As you're investing your own time and money into your own business, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of times where entrepreneurs would go through extreme periods of stress. So in order to cope with those situations, you need to be an entrepreneur needs to be extremely motivated and be positive through those rough times. The last quality would be an effective communicator. So essentially, as an entrepreneur, you have to communicate with different stakeholders. You have to communicate with your customers, your employees, the banks, suppliers, government. So an entrepreneur needs to manage all of those kind of communications. He needs to know what is going on. He needs to be able to answer questions. He needs to be able to provide information to every single external stakeholders in order to make sure the business runs smoothly. So we move on to the next part, where we find why governments support startups. Startups are essentially new business organizations, and most governments provide extreme leniency or extreme benefits to startup companies because they play a crucial role in the development of an economy. So startup companies reduce unemployment by creating jobs. So every single small organization that is created tends to employ 2 or 3 or 4 individuals into their business. Now, this adds up a lot, and it creates for a lot of the employment in society. The second factor being increased competition. So the more businesses there are providing similar products, the more competition exists. Now, the real winner is the customer, because when there is competition, there is always going to be lower prices at better quality. The other factor why government support is there might be a shortage of output regarding certain products. So you need externals, you need small businesses to provide for those shortage, and thus they create their own output in order to meet demand. So it's like a demand and supply. So because there is demand and there's less supply, so you have small businesses, new startups that try to provide the supply in order to meet the demand. So sometimes you have startups, charity organizations that provide goods and services that increase social welfare. You have a lot of charity organizations that focus on the aged individuals, or with those with the handicaps, or handicapped individuals, or young kids, or how to deal with veterans. So these are not profit making, and most companies, if you're not being profitable, they don't want to be involved. So this gap is filled by startup businesses that take on this role of providing social welfare. And as you remember, a government's main intention, a public sector, is to increase social welfare. So they support any startup business that helps them in order to reach their goals of increasing social welfare. The other thing is, every small plant, every big tree, one day started as a small plant. So you have a budding tree. From a seed, it grows into a tree. Similarly, small businesses have the chance, or there is a small chance of them becoming a really big business. When you grow in size, you tend to pay more taxes, you create more jobs, thus you help the economy. So governments try to provide aids to startups in different forms. First of all, they have centers where they provide advice through experienced individuals, staff. So we studied previously that entrepreneurs sometimes lack the experience and knowledge in order to run their own business. So they tend to address this issue by providing centers where you can contact individuals that provide you advice regarding matters. They also provide you with incentives like reduce costs of premises. They might, because you're a startup business, they might reduce the rent of, or reduce the purchase costs of certain land. They might provide you loans from the National Bank at lower interest rates, and they could provide you subsidies for training of your workers. So there are schemes where government finances education of workers or retraining workers in order for the workers to gain skill sets, new skill sets. And the last but not least is tax exemption. So if a government is looking to bolster a certain area of the area or a certain industry, they could provide certain tax exemptions in order to influence that sector. So when you're starting a new business, you need to have a business plan. That is fundamental to startup. So a business plan is a document that contains business objectives with details regarding its operations, finance, and its owners. So a business plan is essentially a document where you explain every small details regarding what are your objectives, how are you going to run your operations, so how are you going to get your supplies, how are you going to manufacture, how are you going to deliver your products to customers. And then you have financing. Where are you going to get your working capital? Where are you going to get your long-term and short-term finances? So every small detail is addressed in a business plan. Now, when you're going to a bank and asking for a loan in order to finance your business, you need to have a business plan. So think of any individuals coming up to you and asking for a loan. Normally, common sense dictates you asking them, why would you provide them your money? What's the benefit to you? Are they trustworthy? So this is essentially a trust test. So if you have a solid business plan, if you have an answer to all the questions that are being asked, then you could essentially be trusted with the financing. So a business plan also allows an entrepreneur to think out. So when you're writing down something, or when you're, you know, investigating every small details, it helps you identify potential shortages of cash flow and risks. So it tends to identify areas where you need to focus more of your time. So it also helps you plan for your future. So when you think about the beginnings, you think over a period of time, like over 4 months, what you would need to invest on, what you need to manage. So the diagram here is a cash budget. So this is very essential that you show a plan regarding your finances. You show how there might be different months where you might have a shortage in cash, and where you could supply this shortage by maybe taking out a bank loan, or maybe you receiving certain receipts in the later, in the next months, that will cover the shortages created previously. So the next part would be comparing business size. Now, business size can vary in accordance to the yardstick used to measure it. So you have different tools, different types of measuring a business size. So there are different ways to measure your business size. A business size, determining the size of a business, is important because you have stakeholders such as investors. Investors want to know the risks and reward they would get by investing in your business. So that would be very dependent on your size. It will also, the government also is involved in determining a size, because normally tax rates are dependent on the size of your business. So that could be on your revenue, or that could be on other rules set by the government tax code. Banks also try to understand whether you would be able to repay a loan, or whether there are assets that could be sold in order to pay those loans back. Competitors also try to identify the organization's size to know the risk it faces from that organization. And workers tend to try to determine their job security, and maybe potentially they have a pride, in essence, of working for a big company, such as, say you work for a company like Google or Apple, or maybe a famous gaming company like EA Sports. And there's a lot of pride involved in working for a big branded business. So we talked about different yardsticks. Now, one of the yardsticks is number of employees. So labor intensive firms employ more workers compared to capital intensive firms. So there are two types of businesses: labor intensive and capital intensive. Labor intensive means you have more individuals working in the business. You have more persons involved. And capital intensive is where you have more machinery rather than individuals working in the business. The other yardstick that could be used is value of output. So this is essentially the value of your goods that you manufacture. So it's used in manufacturing business. So the limitation would be that a firm may produce a few number of very expensive products. So you might have in the automotive industry where you have luxury brands that produce very small units, but their values are really high compared to the other big manufacturer of cars, that low cost cheap cars that are being sold to the larger public. So you need to think carefully when you're determining your size of business by using one yard. The other tool that could be used is in terms of revenue. So the value of sales. So this is used in retailing businesses that sell similar goods. So you have an example of a gaming shop and a pharmaceutical shop. So when you tend to measure in terms of value of sales, you might have a small business where they sell less amount units of products, but they have an extreme value of those items. So that could really inflate the picture of the size, essentially. So your revenue might be high, but essentially at the end of the day, you could be a very small business. The other factor could be the value of capital employed. Now, capital employed is defined as the total value of capital invested into a business. And business that tend to use capital intensive method could provide misleading picture. So think about a capital intensive business is a business that uses a lot of machinery equipment. So when you're trying to measure two businesses, when you're trying to compare two businesses size and you try to use solely their capital value, so normally a capital intensive firm would look a lot larger than those that are using labor intensive methods. So it could be maybe say you work in a farm, so you could use a tractor essentially, or you could use many individuals to do the work. So depending on the type of tools you use, the value of your business could be rather misleading because you use one measure. So we move on to understand why businesses seek growth. Now, businesses seek growth in order to attain higher profits. The more you sell, the more profits you earn. Higher revenue, lower costs enable you to earn higher profits. There is also higher prestige, so your brand name increases when your size increases. And also the lower the average costs. When you tend to increase your scale of operations, when you tend to be involved with more manufacturing and more selling. So think about yourself going to the local shop, and when you tend to buy a large sum of goods, you tend to get a discount. So this is true for businesses as well. The larger scale businesses have an advantage of lower average costs. So business also seek growth because it helps them achieve a higher share of the market. You sell more, that means that you also are tending to the needs of more customers of the population. So there are two main ways a business can attain growth. They could be internal growth or external growth. So internal growth would be a business seeking to reinvest its own profits in order to expand its scale. So this is organic. So over the years, a business earns profit and then it saves it up, and gradually it buys out a new location. And it's a very slow, but it's a very calculated and controlled expansion. External growth is where a business gets involved in either a takeover or merger with another business. So it could essentially buy out another business, or it could essentially agree to, run alongside with another business. So they could become partners. So external growth could be in three forms. They could be horizontal integration, vertical integration, or a conglomerate merger. So horizontal integration is where one firm merges or takes over another firm in the same industry at the same stage of production. So the same industry, meaning you should be if you're in the fast food industry, it should be in the fast food industry. If you're in the automotive industry, it should be in the automotive industry. So here an example is, say you're in a fast food company, you're McDonald's in the fast food company. So if McDonald's decided to take over one of the fast food chains in Saudi Arabia, so that would mean that it was taking over another firm in the same industry. The important part is it should be at the same stage of production, so either being manufacturing or retailing. So a fast food like McDonald's, say imagine if it was only retailing and then it takes over another retailer in Saudi Arabia. That is horizontal integration. So then you have vertical integration. Now, vertical integration is when one firm merges with or takes over another firm in the same industry. So bear in mind, both horizontal and vertical integration involves in being integrating with someone in the same industry. But here you have a different stage of production. So you could essentially, as a manufacturer, take over your retailer or take over or merge with your supplier. The last form is a conglomerate merger. So the last form of business growth. This is when one business merges with or takes over a firm in a completely different industry. So you could be a food manufacturer and suddenly you decide that you want to take over another automotive. So say McDonald's decides to take over Ferrari. That would be a conglomerate merger because both of them deal in completely different industries. So the benefits of integration. The horizontal integration allows the merger to reduce the number of competitors in the industry. So say Ferrari took over Aston Martin or Aston Martin took over Ferrari. So what would essentially happen is one business takes over the market share of the other. This allows for opportunities of economies of scale. Economies of scale is the cost savings that arise due to a business increasing its scale of operations. So again, back to that example of you buying more raw materials. The more raw materials you buy, it could be bulk buying where you could share your expenses. There are other opportunities for economies of scale, such as, if, for example, think about Aston Martin and Ferrari combining their businesses. Now, do you think they would need two sets of management to run the same business? They could essentially run with the same one set of management could run both the businesses. This is an example of economies of scale. Now, combined businesses would provide a larger share of the total market. We talked about that already, where Aston Martin could essentially buy out Ferrari and take over their market share. So you have, in terms of vertical integration, remember it is about taking over or merging with a firm in the same industry but at different stage of production. So they could be forward or backward. So you as a manufacturer, if you take over your supplier, that would be backward. If you take over your retailer, that is forward. So we'll talk about that in details later. But a forward vertical integration essentially allows you to have the luxury of an assured outlet. So as a manufacturer, if you take over your retailer, you know that there's somewhere where you can sell your products. You could also take over the profit margin. So every stage of production has a cut of profit margin. So there's a profit margin involved in every stage. And you could essentially wipe that and increase your own. You could also prevent the retailer from selling your competitor's product. Like, this is true for, if a manufacturer takes over, if a Nestle, if a chocolate manufacturer takes over a shop, they could essentially, prevent other companies' chocolate from being sold. So, manufacturers also are, businesses that are involved in the previous stage of production sometimes lack that touch with consumers, sometimes lack that information they need, that marketing information. So they could collect this information first hand from the next step. Now, backward vertical integration similarly provides an assured source of raw materials. So you have a supplier that will provide you good quality components in order to run your business. There's also an existing profit margin issue, which is similarly absorbed, and also you can prevent your suppliers from providing to the competitors. The last thing being is the costs of components could be controlled. So when you're buying from your suppliers, you could control your costs by knowing exactly how much and what is being supplied to you. So now we talk about vertical integration. So think about a fast food shop. So think about the different stages involved in creating a burger served to you at a restaurant. So you have a farm where you have the raw materials, such as when the beef or the chicken or mutton is produced, and this is sent over to the manufacturer, which converts them into patties. So these patties are then sold to retailer, who turns them into burgers that are served to you. So if you're talking about vertical integration, so vertical integration backward would be for the food manufacturer to buy out the farm. So backward meaning you're buying someone in the previous stage of production. Okay? Now forward would be buying out the next stage of production. So the manufacturer would essentially buy out the retailer. So this is the difference between backward and forward. So conglomerate integration is where a business is involved in taking over or merging with another in a completely different industry. So this helps you diversify your activities, which reduces the risks of failure. So think about an airlines company, a chocolate company merging with, or all of them merging together, an individual owning an airline company, a chocolate company, and a cartoon company. So, like Walt Disney. Now, what would happen is, say for example, there is an existing, say for example, an industry suffers. So, say for example, people become more health conscious and they start avoiding chocolates. So, I know this is very unlikely, but if this scenario were to happen, then the business would, if the chocolate sector fails, the business would not totally shut down, because it would have other options where it's airline industry or where it's cartoon industry. The media industry is going to work fine and cover up for it. Another thing is there's a transfer of ideas. So airline have catering where they serve food to their passengers. So the airline could essentially ask the chocolate manufacturers that, how can we present better desserts to our customers? And the chocolate manufacturers could provide ideas. The media industry could provide for content to the airline industry. So you can see there are a scope where industries tend to overlap with one another, and a conglomerate could be helpful for all of them. So there are problems to business growth, and there tend to be some sort of solutions that are provided. So the problem number one would be large businesses is difficult to control, resulting in diseconomies of scale. So when you have large operations, what you have is, there might be places where, say there is a fast food chain of around 100 shops, and they're all ordering raw materials when essentially the raw materials needed has already been ordered. So this creates overlapping of expenses and creates wastage. So this creates diseconomies of scale. Now, one of the solutions could be decentralization, where you tell the individual small units to have their own freedom of decision making, which reduces the risks of taking wrong decisions. Another thing would be poor communication. So when you're communicating with many different branches, the message could get lost, or the message could be very completely changed. So the meaning could be completely changed from source to the end. So say you could start this test where you could whisper something into one of your classmates and ask this message to be whispered along 10 or 20 individuals, and check what the final individual actually heard the message as. So this could give you an example of how problematic communication could be. Thankfully, you could maybe employ the latest equipment, IT equipment, to help you with your communication. So you could have Skype, you could have more emails, you could have more webcam or more other tools that helps communicate. So normally when businesses grow, there is also a cost of expansions, which creates financing issues. And this may create a problem where you might not be able to pay off certain expenses because you invested so much. So the solutions could be you planning out and ensuring there is long-term finance available with helping expansion. So when you expand a business, you should always seek to use long-term financial solutions. Integration may also cause unexpected problems. So there is, say for example, when you think about Aston Martin and Ferrari combining together, so there could be different styles or different cultures in the business, and this could create problems. What you could do is introduce a change management system, or where you could introduce a management style where you can accommodate for different cultures and help both of them get along with their differences. So reduce the differences and increase the common harmony between them. Then again, you have some businesses that actively, on purpose, decide to stay small. This could be because of the type of industry the business operates in. Now, your business could be operating in an industry where it should retain close and personal relations with its customers. So when you become a large company, that is very hard for a business owner to keep in touch with every single individual or tailor to all of your individual needs. The other thing could be market size. So a plumber or a hair salon, or hairdresser, or think about these kind of car wash. You could have these things that the customers may be very small and there is not a large demand for it every day. So you have small businesses for them. That restricts their growth because of demand. The other thing could be the owner's objectives. So when you expand your business, you take on the risks of more stress and challenge, and some people may not be willing or ready to sacrifice that amount of effort for the reward. So sometimes profit is not the bigger picture. The bigger picture could be being happy rather than sacrificing your happiness in order to be more profitable by expanding your business. So we learned about businesses failing in the start, where we learned about new business tend to fail. So most of the reasons, some of the common reasons, are overexpansion, where the business has, without actually deciding, without being growing, expanding in a controlled environment, they rapidly expand and they do not take account for all of the expansion. So say a manufacturer suddenly decides to increase its output by 10 times. Now, if there are no customers for it, at the end of the day, all you're going to do is manufacture goods that are going to be stored in the warehouse. So this creates a chaotic environment. So the lack of control could result in increased expenses and wastage. Also, poor communication, again, where the message is distorted over time, could create problems. Poor financial management. So cash is normally king. Cash is king. So if at the end of the day, no matter how profitable your business is, if you do not have the cash to pay off for expenses, your business is going to fail. So this is why financial management is very essential. And if you do not control your finances, no matter what your ideas or how successful they are, your business is going to fail. The third thing being risks of new startups. So new businesses tend to lack the financial backing and resources and research needed to survive. So the lack of expertise and the knowledge leads to poor decision making and less financial resources to fall back onto, which results in business fear. So last but not least, you think about the recipe of a successful business. So essentially, first of all, you need to create a business plan where you map out all the details regarding your business. Second thing is you need to manage your finances. So this is a continuous process where you always make sure that you have enough in your cash to run your day-to-day expenses, and if you need to plan for investing in the future, you make sure you get sources where you can provide for. And also proper communications, where you need to communicate with all the different stakeholders involved, stakeholders being your customers, employees, the government, suppliers, banks. Everyone needs to be communicated. So these are the essential recipes of a business being successful. So thank you for being with me, and this is the end of chapter 3, and hope to see you very soon at another video. So you could revise and you could watch this over shortly, and if you're hungry by looking at all the food examples, then maybe you should take a break and have a snack. Take care. Bye.